Hello students, today we discuss about pollination. What is pollination? Describe the different types of pollination or describe or explain the different pollinating agencies, pollinating agents. What is self or cross-pollination? Difference between self and cross-pollination. So these things we learn in this session. Transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of the flower is called as pollination. Pollination means transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of flower is known as pollination. Both male and female gametes are non-motile. Therefore, pollinating agencies or pollinating agents be required for to carry or for to transport pollen grains from anther to stigma of flower. This process is very essential for the formation of seed or fruits. This process discovered by Camerius in 1694. Observe this diagram. In this diagram, here the anthers, from anther, within anther, pollen grains are produced by the process known as microsporogenesis, and at the maturity, this anther will get burst, and to liberate the pollen grains, this process known as dehiscences, these pollen grains are transported to the stigma by wind, water, by some animals, for example, like butterfly, honeybees, snail, some birds, or snails. So these agents, they transport pollen grains from anther to stigma or from one flower to the another flower, known as pollinating agents. So pollinating agents are required for this process. See, in this flowchart, there are classification of pollen grain is given. Classification of pollination is given. Pollination can be divided into the two main types, self-pollination and cross-pollination. So what is self-pollination? The transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of the same flower is known as autogamy, and transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of another flower known as getinogamy. In a self-pollination, only one plant is involved or only one flower is involved. In cross-pollination, pollen grains are transported or transferred from one flower to another flower which is located on another plant body of a same or a different species is known as a cross-pollination. Specifically, in a xenogamy, transport of pollen grains from anther to stigma of another flower of the same species is known as a xenogamy. And in artificially, some plant breeders, or in a plant breeding experiment, artificial pollination is done in which pollen grains are transferred from anther to stigma of another flower of another species that located on a different plant is known as a hybridization. Then some pollinating agents are given. Abiotic means non-living and biotic means living. Wind, water, these are the abiotic factors. They involve in transportation of pollen grains. And biotic factors like smell, birds, insects, or some other vertebrates, they are involved. Then see the given diagram. In this diagram, there are two plants we look. In a first autogamy condition, pollen grains are transferred from anther to stigma of the same plant. That is a self-pollination. So autogamy and getinogamy, these are the type of self-pollination. In autogamy, pollination takes place within a single flower. So the flower is bisexual. Anther and stigma, they mature at the same time. Therefore, self-pollination is occur in this flower. In getinogamy, pollen grains are transported from anther to stigma of another flower. This flower is located on the same plant. Atom means self and getino means neighbor. So the getinogamy, in which two nearest flowers they are involved. In this condition, flower may be unisexual or flowers they are bisexual, but in bisexual flower, maturation is of a pollen grains is take place at different periods. Then in cross-pollination, in a cross-pollination or in a xenogamy, pollen grains are transferred from one flower to another flower of another plant. Okay, see in this diagram, this autogamy, getinogamy, and xenogamy. Now we discuss detail about the self-pollination. So what is definition of self-pollination? The transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of a same flower or another flower present on a same plant. Autogamy, in which only one flower, or autogamy is occur within a single flower. Transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of the same flower is known as autogamy, in which flower must be the bisexual, for example, pea. In getinogamy, getino means neighbor, gamos means marriage. In getinogamy, transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of another flower located on a same plant. So these are the two types of self-pollination, that is autogamy and getinogamy. In autogamy, flower is bisexual. In getinogamy, flower may be the unisexual, and this plant known as monoecious. Then second type of pollination is a cross-pollination. Or before it, we learn about significance or advantages of self-pollination and disadvantages of self-pollination. First, we discuss about significance or advantages of self-pollination. Self-pollination, it is a sure method of pollination because pollen grains are transported from anther to stigma of same plant. There is no need of external agents. The external agents are not involved in this method. This method is economical method because there is no need to make flower bright and attractive. So there is no wastage of energy for making bright and attractive flower. There is no need to produce fragrance or a sweet smell. Then less wastage of pollen grain is take place. Genetic stability is maintained in a progeny. Due to this is one very important advantage of self-pollination is it maintains genetic stability into their parents. It maintains homozygosity. It results in inbreeding or selfing. Self-pollination results in inbreeding. Then, what are the disadvantages? See, first one, improved varieties are not produced in self-pollination. Undesirable characters are not eliminated. Undesirable character means those characters are, are not very important, or these characters were morphological characters maybe of a plant. These undesirable characters are not eliminated or desirable. These are the important characters of the plant, what the size, shape, etc., or the yield of a crop. So the desirable characters are not introduced into the progeny. Progeny becomes weak or weaker. It causes inbreeding depression. So it's one of the drawbacks in which, due to the continuous self-pollination, inbreeding depression is take place. Progeny become very weak, more susceptible to the diseases. Disease resistant capacity is low in a progeny obtained by self-pollination, and it do not causes variation that do not leads into the evolution. So these are the drawbacks or disadvantages of self-pollination. Then next type of pollination is a cross-pollination. In cross-pollination, pollen grains are transferred from anther to stigma of another flower located on another plant body. Cross-pollination is known as allogamy. There's two types, that is xenogamy and hybridization. Xenogamy is also known as a cross-pollination. Transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of another flower located on a different plant belonging to the same species. Remember, in a xenogamy, the species is the same, but in hybridization, species is a different. Example, xenogamy, it is occur in a hibiscus plant. It is commonly called as cross-pollination or outbreeding. It generates genetically variabilities in which two plants of same or different species they are involved, and therefore the genetic variability is occurred. Hybridization, the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of a different plant belonging to different species. For example, two species of cotton in which the pollen grains are transported from one flower to another of another species. Then this is known as hybridization. And hybrid varieties are obtained by this method. In a xenogamy or in hybridization, variation or genetically variability is generated. Then, what are the advantages or the disadvantages of cross-pollination? Advantages of cross-pollination is it causes genetic recombination and variation. Undesirable character, the character those of or the character in which there is this character in which our interest is nil, or the character they are not having more importance, these undesirable characters are eliminated and desirable characters are introduced in offsprings by cross-pollination. So cross-pollination is more significant. Offsprings obtained are strong and disease resistant. It favors the process of evolution. So genetic variability is occurred. Offsprings become more strong and disease resistant, and it favor the process of evolution. These are the advantages of cross-pollination. Disadvantages of cross-pollination is it is not an economical method because in cross-pollination, pollinating agent is required. So there is for to attract these pollinating agents like birds, honeybee, butterfly, flower waste their energy for making bright, or this plant waste their energy to make flower bright and attractive. There is more wastage of pollen grains. Genetic purity is not maintained because genetic recombinations are take place in cross-pollination. Therefore, genetic purity is not maintained in offsprings. So these are the drawbacks of cross-pollination. Then see what is casmogamous flower. When a flower open and to expose its sex organs known as a casmogamous. The next point is condition that leads to autogamy or self-pollination. At which condition favors the self-pollination, or at which condition self-pollination or autogamy is take place. Specifically, when autogamy is take place, see these 3 points. First one is homogamy, when anther and stigma mature at the same time. Then only self-pollination or autogamy is take place within the flower. Then cleistogamy, in a cleistogamous flower or the cleistogamous flower, they are undergone in Camelina bengalensis. These flowers They remain closed, they never open. Therefore, only self-pollination is ever. So this condition known as cleistogamy and bisexuality means flower contain both male and female reproductive florets. The homogamy, then cleistogamy and bisexuality they favor of this condition that leads into the heterogamy or self-pollination. See in this picture, chasmogamous flower and cleistogamous flower are shown. Cleistogamous flower they are underground and chasmogamous flower they are aerial. They expose their reproductive organs. In second diagram, we observe these underground flower they are remain closed. Then the types of pollination on the basis of agents in pollen. First is the abiotic agent and second is biotic agents. Abiotic agents, these are the non-living, for example, wind and water. First one is anemophily. What is anemophily? Pollination by wind or the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of flower by wind, by air, known as anemophily. And this plant known as anemophilous plant. It is occur in a grass, maize, jawar, barley, and corn. So, what are the floral adaptations for the anemophily? Which type of adaptations are occur in flower or to favor pollination by wind? So, which are the adaptations? See, flowers are small, inconspicuous, and without bright color. These flowers they are not attractive. There is no need to make flower attractive. Flowers are unisexual, very important feature. Stamens with a long filament and versatile anther. It is very important feature of a annuphilous flower. Versatile anther. This anther it spin or it rotate along with water, along with the air current, and then pollen grains are liberated. Pollen grains are transferred along with the current of air or current of wind and then transfer from one flower to the another. So versatile anther is a very important characteristics. Pollen grains produced in a large number. So this method is a chancy one. Pollen grains, more loss of pollen grains take place. Pollen grains, therefore pollen grains are produced in a large number in an anemophilous flower. Pollen grains are light in weight and dry. And another important feature is the stigma of this flower is a feathery. Feathery stigma help to trap the pollen grains carried by wind current. So these are the floral adaptations. See, in a given diagram or given picture is of a maze. In a maze, male inflorescence is occur at the top and the female inflorescence is occur below the male inflorescence. And in maze, the wind pollination is take place. Then next pollinating agent is a water. Pollination by water is known as hydrophilic. These are of two types. One is hypohydrophily and another is epihydrophily. The plants present in water or the aquatic plant, they pollinate with help of the water. So the water acts as a pollinating agent. In a hydrophilous plant, flowers are unisexual, small, without fragrance and nectar. Pollen grains are unwettable, while less wet due to the coated with mucilage. The specific gravity of pollen grain is controlled by one or more starch grain present in it. See, hydrophily, it is of two types. First one is hypohydrophily. Pollination occurs below the water is known as hypohydrophily. Hypo means below. Hypohydrophily. Pollination occurs below the water surface is known as a hypohydrophily. It is occur in some aquatic plants like Zostera, Ceratophyllum, etc. In these plants, the pollen grains are heavier than water. Therefore, they sink down and caught by the stigma of female flower. Submerged female flowers are occur. Pollen grains are ribbon-like without exine. So exine is absent in this pollen grain, and this pollen grain they reach on a stigma of a female flower or they reach on a stigma of a female flower and pollination is take place. Then second type is the epihydrophily. In epihydrophily, so what is epihydrophily? The pollination at the surface of water is known as epihydrophily, in which male and female flowers are submerged. Both male and female flowers they are submerged. They produced on separate plant, that is dioecious plant. Male plant is separate or female plant is separate. Male flower, firstly they after maturation, male flowers they detached from the parent body or from the inflorescence and they float on the water surface. At the maturity, whenever female flower is mature, this female flower they have coiled and long pedicel. This pedicel means the stalk of flower. It undergo the uncoiling at maturity and it reach on a water surface to ensure pollination. It is occur in Vallisneria. So remember the examples of this Vallisneria. Zostera is an example of hypohydrophily and Vallisneria is an example of the epihydrophily. So these are the aquatic plants. So the specific gravity of pollen grain is equal to that of water. That is why they float on a water surface. In this epihydrophily, the specific gravity of pollen grain is equal to the water. In some aquatic plant, pollination by wind is take place, or pollination by insect also occur in aquatic plants. Then some biotic agents. First one is entomophily. Entomophily means pollination by insects. Insects like butterfly, honeybee, or other kinds of insects. They involve in a entomophily or in a pollination process. Floral adaptations for entomophily, like for to attract insect, these flowers, they are bright and attractive. Flower produce pleasant or nice fragrance and nectars. Stigma is sticky due to presence of mucilaginous secretion and rub due to presence of hairs. Pollen grains are spiny or rough. These spiny pollen grains, they attach to the legs or wings of insect, and due to the sticky nature of stigma, these pollen grains are attached to the or they stuck to the stigma. So these are the adaptations occur in entomophily. So entomophily is pollination by insect. Entomology is a study of insect. Anemophily is pollination of air or wind. Remember, do not confuse in these two terms. Then one example is given in your book, that is liver mechanism in salvia. In a salvia plant, the flowers, they are attractive. This flower in which androecium is mature first, then gynoecium. So it favors the cross-pollination. This flower is bisexual. Stamens of these flowers, they are bifurcated. It is branched. Upper branch, it having fertile anther, and lower branch is a sterile. When insect visit to this flower, it settle on sterile branch and upper anther lobe, it dust or it stick on their backside to liberate pollen grains. Then this same insect visit to the another flower and it pollinate the another flower because the stigma of this flower is sticky. So this lever mechanism is occurring salvia. It is also known as a turnpike mechanism. Then second type is a ornithophily, pollination by birds. Ornithology, that is the branch of biology, deals with study of birds. So in an ornithophily, pollen grains are transported from one flower to another flower by birds. So what are the adaptations for ornithophily? The flowers are large, bright, and attractive. These flowers, they are thick and fleshy. The floral parts of flower are thick and fleshy. Corolla is tubular, tube-like corolla. They lack fragrance because bird having poor sense of smell. They produce large amount of nectar or pollen grains. Pollen grains are sticky and spiny. When birds, for example, hummingbird, they visit the flower, they suck the nectar, the copious nectar or the edible pollen grains. They suck the nectar. During that time, the pollen grains are attached on their beak. and same bird visit to the another flower, then reach another flower, it get pollinated. Flower produce dilute nectar. So example that is Callistomona, Bottlebrush, Bignonia, Vitia, Mombax, etc. These are the examples of ornithophily, or this flower called as ornithophilous flower. The next one is the Caraprophily. So what is Caraprophily? Pollination by bat known as a Caraprophily. So the bat, it is a nocturnal mammal, and this bat help in transport of pollen grains. So the flower they pollinated with a bat known as Caraprophilous flower. So the flower, this flower they open at the night. Flowers are large, strong, or stout. Plants are nocturnal, or the flowers they open at night, called as nocturnal, and they open at the night. Flower emit routine fruit-like fermenting fruity odor. So fermented smell is released by the flower. It helps to attract the bees back. It produces copious nectar. Large quantity of pollen grains are produced. Example of these is Anthocephalus, cadam tree, Kygelia, sausage tree, Adansonia, baobab tree. So these are the examples of a floral adaptation in Caraprophily. Okay. So in this session, we will learn about what is pollination, types of pollination, self and cross-pollination, types of self and cross-pollination, that is ectogamy, lepidogamy, and xenogamy, and the floral adaptations for wing pollination, anemophily, hydrophily, entomophily, paraprophily, or ornithophily. So complete this homework, write in your notebook and read the book simultaneously. Okay.